I never expected that an act of spectacular clumsiness, the kind that results in a trip to the emergency room and 2 matching plaster casts, would completely change my life. But that's exactly what happened. That's how I met Caleb, or rather, how I truly got to know the man who lived 1 floor below me. Before the fall, he was just a part of the building's ambient noise, the muffled bass of his music, the occasional cheerful greeting in the hallway, the scent of garlic and herbs drifting up through the floorboards. After the fall, he became everything. My name is Miles. At the time, I was a 28-year-old graphic designer, which is a nice way of saying I spent most of my waking hours hunched over a tablet in my small, sunny apartment. My life was a neat collection of routines. Morning coffee, a walk through the park if the weather was nice, then hours of clicking and sketching, shaping logos and layouts for clients I'd never met in person. It was a good life, a quiet life. Stable. But if I was being honest with myself, usually late at night when the blue light of the monitor was the only thing illuminating the room, it was also a lonely life. My world was contained within the 4 walls of my apartment, and I had, without realizing it, become a master of self-sufficiency. The building I lived in was an old brick 3-flat, the kind with charming imperfections like creaky floors and windows that rattled when the wind blew just right. I was on the 2nd floor. Caleb was on the 1st. I knew his name from the mailbox, C. Jensen. I knew his occupation, or I assumed I did, from the gym bag permanently attached to his shoulder and the lean, powerful way he moved. He had that easy, sun-kissed confidence of someone who spends a lot of time outdoors, someone comfortable in their own skin. He had kind eyes, a warm brown that crinkled at the corners when he smiled his brief, neighborly smiles. And, of course, I had a completely silent, completely hopeless crush on him. It was the kind of crush you keep tucked away like a pressed flower in a book, something to look at occasionally but never act on. He was, in my mind, the epitome of the guy who was not for me. He was outgoing, athletic, and radiated a kind of golden retriever energy. I was introspective, artistic, and radiated the energy of a house cat who might let you pet him if you approached slowly and with a treat. Plus, I just assumed he was straight. It was the safest, most self-protective assumption to make. It kept my quiet longing in a manageable box, preventing it from spilling out into the real world and making things awkward in the hallway. So I observed from a distance, appreciating the view as he'd load his bike onto the rack on his car or jog down the street, his headphones firmly in place. He was a pleasant feature of my landscape, nothing more. The inciting incident, the catalyst for the complete upheaval of my carefully ordered world, was laughably mundane. It involved a large, cumbersome box of archival paper I'd ordered for a project, a freshly polished hardwood floor, and a moment of misplaced overconfidence. I was trying to carry the box from the doorway to my studio space in one go, shuffling my feet instead of taking proper steps. My socked foot met a particularly slick patch of floor, and my momentum did the rest. The world tilted, the box flew from my grasp, and I flailed, instinctively throwing my hands out to break my fall. It was a textbook mistake, one that every kid learns not to make after their first tumble. But instinct is a powerful, stupid thing. I heard 2 distinct, sickening cracks as my wrists absorbed the full impact of my body weight against the unyielding floor. The pain was immediate, white-hot, and absolute. It was so intense it stole my breath, leaving me gasping on the floor like a landed fish, staring at the ceiling and wondering how I was going to even call for help. Somehow, through a haze of agony and humiliation, I managed to use my knuckles to dial 911 on my phone, which had thankfully skittered nearby. The trip to the hospital was a blur of sympathetic paramedics and fluorescent lights. The diagnosis was grimly straightforward: bilateral radius fractures. In layman's terms, I had broken both of my wrists. Cleanly. The result was 2 heavy, cumbersome plaster casts that extended from my palms to just below my elbows, leaving my fingers free but mostly useless. I was, for all intents and purposes, completely helpless. Getting back into my apartment building was the first challenge. I managed to pay for the cab with a clumsy tap of my credit card, but the front door was a different beast. I fumbled with the keys, trying to pinch them between my cast-encased hands, dropping them twice. It was on my 3rd, increasingly frantic attempt that the door to the 1st-floor apartment opened. Caleb stood there, holding a bag of trash, his brow furrowed in concern. "Whoa, Miles, you okay? What on earth happened to you?" It was the first time he'd ever used my name. I was so startled that I just stared at him blankly for a second, the keys dangling precariously from my stiff fingers. "I, had a little accident," I mumbled, feeling a hot flush of embarrassment creep up my neck. Gravity and I had a disagreement. Gravity won. A small smile touched his lips, but his eyes were full of genuine worry. "A little accident? Looks more like a full-blown catastrophe." He stepped forward, effortlessly plucking the keys from my grasp. "Here, let me get that." He opened the main door and then followed me up the stairs. "Seriously, man, are you going to be able to manage?" he asked, unlocking my apartment door for me. The full weight of my situation crashed down on me then. Manage? I couldn't open a door. I couldn't cook. I couldn't type. I couldn't even get dressed without a monumental struggle. The tidy, independent world I had built for myself had shattered as surely as my wrist bones had. Tears of pain and frustration pricked at my eyes. "I honestly don't know," I admitted, my voice thick. Caleb's expression softened completely. All of that casual, athletic confidence was replaced by a look of profound empathy. "Okay," he said, his voice calm and steady. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. You're going to give me your number. And if you need anything, and I mean anything, groceries carried up, jars opened, whatever, you text me. Don't be proud. Just text me." "Got it," I nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude so immense it left me speechless. He helped me program his number into my phone using the awkward hunt and peck method with my index finger. His fingers brushed against mine as he guided my hand, and the brief, simple contact sent a jolt through me that had nothing to do with my injuries. It was the first crack in the foundation of my carefully constructed assumptions about him. The days that followed were a lesson in humility. My life, once a solo performance, became an awkward duet. Caleb was true to his word. He became my hands. He'd text me every morning, "Need coffee?" And I'd text back, "Yes, please." He'd appear at my door with a steaming cup from the cafe down the street, a small smile on his face, and refuse any money I tried to offer. He'd bring up my mail, sort it onto my counter, and carry in my grocery deliveries. Our interactions were brief, transactional, but they slowly started to change. The initial awkwardness began to melt away, replaced by a comfortable rhythm. We started talking more. He'd linger at the door, asking about my work, about how I was feeling. I learned that he wasn't a personal trainer. He was a landscape architect. He worked with his hands, too, just in a different way, shaping gardens and parks instead of pixels and fonts. It made a strange kind of sense. He cultivated beauty and order in the outside world. He started bringing up dinner. He loved to cook, he said, and he always made too much anyway. The first time he showed up with a container of homemade chicken soup, I almost cried. The aroma filled my apartment, a warm, savory scent that felt like a hug. "My grandma's recipe," he said with a shrug, as if it were nothing. "She always said food is the best medicine." He'd open the container for me, make sure I had a spoon I could manage to hold, and then he'd leave, giving me my space. It was during one of these food deliveries that I saw the first real glimpse of his own vulnerability. He brought up a fragrant beef stew and was setting it on the counter when he noticed a stack of sympathy cards from my family on the table. He picked one up, a simple one from my sister. "Must be tough, having your family so far away," he said quietly, his back mostly to me. "It is," I admitted. "They all offered to come, but I told them I was fine. I didn't want to be a burden." He turned around then, and there was a shadow in his eyes I hadn't seen before. "It's not being a burden to need help, Miles." His voice was soft, laced with something that sounded like old sadness. "I used to take care of my dad when he was sick. For a long time, he tried to do everything himself, pushed everyone away. He thought it made him strong, but it just made him lonely." He looked away, clearing his throat. "Anyway, this stew is better hot." The moment passed as quickly as it came, but it stayed with me. He wasn't just some benevolent, handsome neighbor doing a good deed. He was a person with his own history, his own heartbreaks. That revelation did something dangerous to me. It took the manageable, two-dimensional crush I had and inflated it into something terrifyingly three-dimensional. It gave it depth. It gave it weight. It gave it hope. A few nights later, a small, significant thing happened. He brought up a pizza, My request, a desperate craving for something greasy and uncomplicated. He opened the box on my coffee table, and, as I was awkwardly trying to lever a slice onto a plate with the side of my cast, a piece of pepperoni fell onto my sweater. Without a word, without even seeming to think about it, he reached out, plucked the pepperoni off my chest, and popped it into his own mouth. "Chef's tax," he said with a grin. My entire nervous system short-circuited. His fingers had brushed the fabric of my sweater, a fleeting, casual touch, but it felt like a brand. We both froze for a fraction of a second. The air between us suddenly felt thick, charged with an unspoken awareness. His grin faded slightly, his eyes searched mine, and then he cleared his throat and stepped back, breaking the spell. "Enjoy the pizza," he said, his voice a little strained, before quickly seeing himself out. I sat there for a long time, the pizza forgotten, my heart hammering against my ribs. That casual touch felt more intimate than anything I had experienced in years. And I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that something had shifted between us for good. The turning point. The moment when the entire dynamic of our strange, caste-induced relationship fractured and reset into something new, something breathtaking and terrifying. It happened on a Tuesday night, about 3 weeks after my fall. I was feeling particularly low. A big project deadline was looming, and trying to direct a junior designer via voice commands over Zoom was an exercise in soul-crushing frustration. I was tired of being helpless, tired of the dull ache in my wrists, and tired of eating takeout from cardboard containers. I'd ordered Thai food, my go-to comfort meal, green curry with chicken. The problem with green curry, I was about to discover, is that it's nearly impossible to eat with 2 broken wrists. When Caleb brought the bag up, he found me sitting on my sofa, staring at the plastic containers with a look of utter defeat. "Bad day?" he asked gently, setting the bag on the coffee table. "The worst," I sighed, not even trying to hide the misery in my voice. "I think I'd have to lick this out of the bowl to eat it." Caleb opened the containers, and the fragrant steam of coconut, lime, and chili filled the air. He looked at the curry, then at my casts, then at me. I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, a debate, a decision. I expected him to offer a word of encouragement and then leave, as he always did. But he didn't. Instead, he pulled the coffee table closer, sat down on the floor in front of me, and looked me straight in the eye. "Okay," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "This is going to sound weird. But just trust me." "All right." I nodded, my heart starting to beat a little faster. I had no idea what he was planning, but I found that I did trust him. Completely. He picked up a piece of tender, curry-coated chicken with his fingers. He held it up, his expression unreadable. "Open," he said softly. The world stopped. The sound of traffic outside my window faded away. The hum of the refrigerator ceased. There was only the space between us, charged with an impossible intimacy. My mind was screaming. This was too much, too strange, too vulnerable. But my body, my heart, they had a different idea. I parted my lips. He leaned forward, his movements slow and deliberate, and gently placed the piece of chicken in my mouth. His thumb brushed against my lower lip, a soft, warm, accidental touch that sent a wildfire through my veins. The curry was an explosion of flavor on my tongue, spicy, sweet, savory, but I could barely register it. All of my senses were focused on him. On the nearness of his face, the intensity in his dark eyes, the faint scent of his soap and the cold night air clinging to his clothes. He didn't pull back right away. He just watched me, his gaze locked on mine, as if he were trying to read every thought, every feeling on my face. I chewed and swallowed, my throat tight with 1,000 unsaid things. He picked up a piece of bamboo shoot and offered it to me. I accepted, then a slice of bell pepper, then another piece of chicken. He fed me my entire dinner like that, in near total silence. It was the most intimate, most profound, and most deeply embarrassing act of my entire life. I was being fed like a child, like an invalid, and yet it felt like the most adult thing I had ever done. It was an act of complete surrender on my part, and an act of incredible, tender care on his. Each time his fingers met my lips, a silent conversation passed between us. It was a conversation of trust, of vulnerability, of a connection that went far beyond neighborly kindness. When the container was empty, he finally sat back on his heels. The spell was broken, but the magic lingered in the air, thick and shimmering. He didn't smile. He just looked at me, his expression serious, almost searching. "Okay," he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I couldn't find my own voice, so I just nodded, my eyes wide. I felt exposed, stripped bare down to the very core of my longing. He had seen past the casts, past the polite thank yous, and had looked right into the heart of my loneliness and met it with a gesture of radical gentleness. "Okay," he repeated, more to himself than to me. He stood up, gathered the empty containers, and took them to the kitchen. I listened to the sound of him rinsing them in the sink. When he came back, he paused at the door. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then closed it. He just gave me one last, long look, a look that held a universe of questions, and then he left, closing the door softly behind him. I sat there on my sofa, the taste of curry and the ghost of his touch on my lips, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that nothing would ever be the same. The day after Caleb fed me green curry from his fingertips was one of the longest days of my life. The air in my apartment felt different, heavier. Every surface seemed to hold a memory of his presence. The space on the floor where he had sat seemed sacred, charged. I replayed the entire scene in my mind 1,000 times, analyzing every detail, every nuance, until the memory was worn smooth like a worry stone. I dissected the look in his eyes. Was it pity? Or was it something else? Something deeper? I parsed the tone of his voice. Was it just clinical care, or was there affection in its softness? His thumb brushing my lip. Was it an accident, a simple consequence of the task, or was there a flicker of intention behind it? My mind became a battleground between hope and fear. Hope, a fragile, green shoot, insisted that the intimacy we shared was real, a mutual acknowledgement of a powerful, unspoken connection. Fear, a cold and heavy stone, argued that I was a fool, a lonely, pathetic man with 2 broken wrists who was projecting his own desperate desires onto an act of simple, albeit unusual, kindness. This internal debate was exhausting. Every time the floorboards creaked in the hallway, my heart leaped into my throat, half hoping and half dreading it would be him. I found myself staring at my phone, composing and deleting texts. "Thank you for last night," too formal. Last night was what? Amazing? Weird? Life-altering? Nothing felt right. So I said nothing. The silence stretched. He didn't send his usual morning text. The hours ticked by, each one amplifying my anxiety. Maybe I had imagined it all. Maybe I had made him uncomfortable. Maybe my reaction, my wide-eyed, silent shock, had weirded him out, and now he was regretting ever getting involved. The thought was mortifying. I had finally found this fragile, budding connection, and my own intensity had crushed it before it could even bloom. By midday, I had convinced myself that I had ruined everything. The new awareness between us manifested as a tangible awkwardness. Later that afternoon, our paths finally crossed. I was heading out to attempt a short walk, fumbling with the door, when he came up the stairs with his mail. He saw me and stopped short. "Hey," he said, and the word hung in the air between us, heavy and uncertain. It wasn't his usual cheerful greeting. It was cautious. "Hey," I replied, my voice sounding unnaturally high. I couldn't meet his eyes. I focused on a scuff mark on the wall behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. It was filled with everything we weren't saying about the night before. "Heading out?" he asked finally. "Yeah, just for some air," I said. "Cool. Well, be careful." He gave a tight, thin smile that didn't reach his eyes and quickly retreated into his apartment. The click of his door closing felt like a final judgment. It was official. I had made it weird. The easy comfort we had built over the past few weeks had evaporated, replaced by this stiff, painful politeness. The rest of my walk was miserable. The sun was shining, but my world felt gray and cold. Hope was losing the battle. Fear was winning, and it was a bitter, lonely victory. I had been given a glimpse of something wonderful, and it had been snatched away, likely because of my own transparent neediness. I felt like a fool. The next 2 days were a quiet kind of torture. The tension between us was a constant, humming presence. We went back to being just neighbors, but it was worse than before. Before, the distance was comfortable, based on assumptions. Now, it was a chasm created by a shared moment of intimacy that we were both pretending hadn't happened. He stopped bringing me food. I started ordering things that were easy to eat, Things I could manage myself, like sandwiches and protein bars. The silence from his end felt like a confirmation of my worst fears. He was pulling away. My internal monologue was relentless. I berated myself for being so hopeful. What had I expected? That this handsome, kind, landscape architect was secretly harboring feelings for his clumsy, quiet upstairs neighbor? It sounded like the plot of a cheesy romance movie. Real life wasn't like that. In real life, people were just kind. And other people, lonely people like me, mistook kindness for something more. The thought filled me with a familiar, hollow ache. On the third night after the curry incident, I was sitting in the dark, nursing a lukewarm bottle of water and feeling sorry for myself, when there was a knock at my door. It was a soft, hesitant knock. Not a delivery person. Not a courier. My heart did a painful lurch. I knew it was him. I took a deep breath, trying to school my features into a neutral, friendly expression, and went to the door. I opened it to find Caleb standing there. He wasn't holding a container of food or a bag of groceries. His hands were empty, shoved into the pockets of his jeans. He looked incredibly nervous. His eyes, which had been avoiding mine for days, were now fixed on my face, full of a raw, anxious intensity. "Hey," he said, his voice low. Can we talk for a minute?" My carefully constructed neutrality crumbled. All I could do was nod, stepping back to let him in. He walked into the center of the room and just stood there, turning to face me. The air was electric. This was it. This was the conversation where he would gently let me down, apologize for any misunderstanding, and officially reinstate the neighborly boundary. I braced myself for the impact. "Look, Miles," he began, pulling a hand from his pocket to run it through his hair, a gesture I was coming to recognize as a sign of his anxiety. "I'm sorry I've been so weird the last couple of days." "It's fine," I said quickly, maybe too quickly. "Don't worry about it." "No, it's not fine," he insisted, shaking his head. "I made things awkward, and I need to be honest with you." He took a deep breath, like a diver preparing to plunge into cold water. "The other night, when I helped you with your dinner, that wasn't just about being helpful." My own breath caught in my chest. I waited, every nerve ending tingling with anticipation. "I've wanted to talk to you for months," he confessed, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Properly talk to you. Not just say hi in the hall. I'd see you through your window, working at your desk, and I don't know. There was something about you. But I'm a coward. I had no idea how to approach you. And I convinced myself you probably weren't interested." He looked at me then, a vulnerable, pleading look in his eyes. "And then you fell. And it was awful, but it was also an opportunity. An excuse to be around you, to talk to you. And this whole time, bringing you food, helping you out, it was selfish. It was my way of getting close to you, because I was too scared to just ask you out for a coffee." He let out a dry, humorless laugh. "So, when I fed you the other night, that wasn't me being kind, Miles. That was me being incredibly into you and doing something probably really weird and intense because I didn't know what else to do." A wave of dizzying, brilliant relief washed over me, so powerful it almost buckled my knees. All the fear, all the anxiety, all the self-recrimination of the past few days dissolved into nothing. He wasn't pitying me. He wasn't pulling away. He was just as scared and uncertain as I was. "I thought I made you uncomfortable," I whispered, the words barely audible. "I thought I scared you off." "You?" He looked incredulous. "No, I scared myself off. I went back to my apartment that night and thought, what did you just do? You just force-fed the man. That's not a move. That's an assault. I've been freaking out ever since." A laugh escaped me, a real, genuine laugh of pure, unadulterated joy. He smiled back, a real smile this time, one that finally reached his crinkling eyes. The tension that had been strangling us for days finally, blessedly, broke. "So, just to be clear," I said, my voice gaining strength. "You like me?" "Yeah, Miles," he said, stepping closer. The space between us dwindled until I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I really, really like you." "Good," I breathed out. "Because I really, really like you too." And then he closed the final gap between us. He cupped my jaw with one hand, his thumb stroking my cheek, his touch deliberate and sure. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a byproduct of care. This was pure intention. He lowered his head and kissed me. It wasn't a tentative, questioning kiss. It was a kiss of relief, of confirmation, of 1,000 unspoken conversations finally finding their voice. It was gentle and firm and perfect. When we finally broke apart, we just rested our foreheads together, breathing each other in. The awkwardness was gone, replaced by the quiet, certain, and breathtaking start of something new. The weeks that followed the confession felt like waking up from a long, gray dream into a world saturated with color. The casts on my wrists, once symbols of my helplessness, became props in the narrative of our beginning. Caleb was a constant, welcome presence in my apartment, but the dynamic had shifted entirely. He was no longer just my caretaker. He was my partner in crime, my confidant, the man I was falling hopelessly in love with. We fell into a new, wonderful routine. He'd still cook, but now I'd sit in the kitchen with him, offering my clumsy assistance where I could, mostly just watching him move with an easy grace, completely captivated. We'd watch movies on my couch, and I'd rest my head on his shoulder, his arm wrapped carefully around my cast-encumbered torso. We talked for hours, filling in the blanks of each other's lives. I learned about his childhood in the countryside, his passion for native plants, and his secret love for bad 80s action movies. He learned about my anxiety, my obsession with typography, and the way I saw the world in grids and color palettes. The day I got my casts off was a celebration. Caleb drove me to the clinic and waited patiently while a technician sawed through the plaster. The feeling of cool air on my skin for the first time in 6 weeks was euphoric. My wrists were thin, pale, and weak, but they were mine again. When we got back to the car, Caleb just looked at me and smiled. He gently took my hand, my actual, bare hand, and laced his fingers through mine. The simple act of holding hands, a freedom I had taken for granted my entire life, felt like the most profound privilege. Our first official date, postcasts, was perfect in its simplicity. We went to the botanical garden, his favorite place in the city. He walked me through the greenhouses, pointing out rare orchids and towering ferns, his voice full of passion and knowledge. I didn't care about the plants as much as I cared about the way his eyes lit up when he talked about them. He held my hand the entire time, his grip warm and protective, as if he were still making sure I wouldn't fall. Months later, our lives had woven together so seamlessly it was hard to remember a time when he wasn't a part of mine. My apartment had become our apartment. His cookbooks colonized my shelves, his running shoes sat by the door next to my boots, and his laughter filled the rooms that had once been so quiet. The loneliness that had been my constant companion had vanished, replaced by the easy comfort of his presence. One Saturday evening, we were in the kitchen, making dinner together. I was chopping vegetables, my wrists now strong and steady. The rhythmic thud of the knife on the cutting board was a satisfying sound, a testament to my healing. Caleb was at the stove, stirring a pot of pasta sauce that filled the air with the rich scent of tomatoes and basil, a scent that now, to me, smelled like home. He turned from the stove, a wooden spoon in his hand. A bit of sauce was on the tip. He looked at the spoon, then at me, and a playful, mischievous glint appeared in his eye. He walked over and held the spoon up to my lips. "Open," he said, his voice a low, affectionate murmur. It was a direct callback to that first, fragile night, to the moment that had changed everything. I smiled, a wide, genuine smile that came from the very depths of my heart. I leaned in and took the sauce from the spoon, the flavor familiar and comforting. He didn't pull away. He just watched me, his expression full of so much love it made my chest ache in the best possible way. The awkwardness of that first time was gone, replaced by a deep, unshakable intimacy. We were no longer two strangers navigating a weird situation, but two people who had found their other half. Life is funny, isn't it? You can spend years building walls around yourself, believing that self-sufficiency is the same as strength. You can convince yourself that you don't need anyone, that being alone is safer than being vulnerable. You meticulously arrange your life into a neat, predictable pattern, and you call it peace. But true peace, I've learned, isn't about control. It's about surrender. It's not found in solitude, but in the shared, messy, beautiful space between two people. I had to literally break myself to learn that lesson. I had to be brought to a point of total helplessness to understand the profound strength in letting someone else in. My fall didn't just break my bones. It broke down the walls I had so carefully constructed around my heart. And in the wreckage, I found Caleb. He didn't just feed me when I couldn't feed myself. He saw me at my weakest and didn't see a burden. He saw an opportunity for connection. And sometimes, losing your balance is the only way to find your footing in a life more wonderful than any you could have planned for yourself.